We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Daled Amud Beis in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 94b. This daf is sponsored by David Grossman. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you'd like to sponsor an Amud or Daf, see the description box below, and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was discussing the halach in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that if a buyer buys, let's say, a certain amount of grain from a seller, a certain amount of impurity is expected to be mixed in. The Mishnah said a quarter of a kav per sa, that's expected. If that amount of impurity is mixed into the grain, so the buyer has to proceed with the sale. And Rav Huna said, let's say there's more than that that's mixed into the grain, meaning more than a quarter kav per sa of impurity, and the buyer actually sifts through and finds that that is the case. So Rav Huna said the buyer is not only entitled to be reimbursed for the impurity beyond the quarter of a kav, he can actually be reimbursed from the entire thing. And the Gemara asked a question on Rav Huna from a Mishnah in Kilayim. The Mishnah in Kilayim is talking about when you have a mixture of seeds, so it's a problem of Kilayim, and it's exactly at a quarter of a kav per sa. And it says in the Mishnah, you have to take away some of them. So if you're at exactly a quarter of a kav, that's too much. You have to take away some of them. And so the Gemara initially said that a quarter of a kav, that amount by kilayim, is the same thing as more than a quarter of a kav when we talk about the impurity by a sale. And so therefore you see not like Rav Huna, because the Mishnah said you don't have to remove the entire thing. It just said you just take away some of it. So that seems to be not like Rav Huna. And the Gemara then said that's not true. Really, a quarter of a kav by kilayim is the same as a quarter of a kav by a sale. It really is an amount to be expected. But the Gemara said if that's true, so why do you have to remove anything? You're within the amount of impurity that's expected. You're within the amount of kilayim that is expected. And the Gemara said you have to remove some of it. It's just a chumrah that you should remove some of it because we're extra strict when it comes to kilayim. But the Gemara now continues and still asks Ema Seifa, but look at the end of that Mishnah in kilayim. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Yossi Omer Yover. Rabbi Yossi says you have to remove all of it, all of the mixture of seeds. You have to remove all of those extra seeds. And so the Gemara says, Yamrid Bishlama, if you will say correctly, Ki Yoser Meirova Tinofes Dami, that when you have these seeds, when you have a quarter kav, that's the same thing as more than a quarter of a kav when you're talking about impurities. So then we could understand what the machlokas is between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi, because here you have a problematic amount of kilayim, and so b'hakam iflagi. So they're arguing as follows: Tanna Kama savar lo kansinan hetera atu isura. The Tanna Kama says it's true you do have more than you're allowed to have, but we don't impose any fine upon you that you have to remove everything because of what you did that was prohibited. You're just yamayit. He just has to remove a small amount of it so that he's not over the limit of what is not allowed. For Rabbi Yossi savar kansinan, and then we would say that Rabbi Yossi disagrees with the Tanna Kama, and Rabbi Yossi holds kansinan that we do impose a fine. We say once you went over the amount, you have to remove it all. If you understood it that way, we could understand. Elo yamrid kirova dami, but if you're going to say that a quarter of a kav of a mixture of seeds is the same as a quarter of a kav of impurity, meaning you're within the amount that's allowed, so I understand to be a little machmir, to be a little strict and remove a little of it, but amai yover, so why should it be though, according to Rabbi Yossi, that you have to remove the entire thing? That doesn't make sense. And the Gemara says, no, there would be an explanation. Hasam hainu time with Rabbi Yossi. Over there, the reason of Rabbi Yossi is misham demichzi ki makayim kilayim, because if he's only going to remove a little of it and he's going to allow other parts to remain, it actually looks like he's actively contributing to the kilayim in that situation, and that is a problem. As the Rashbam explains, misham demichzi ki makayim kilayim, it looks like he's being makayim by kilayim. Me'achar shemaschil lamayit, once he's already taking away some of the seeds, umeiniach miksasan, and then leaving others, umichzi ki ilu matil osan biyadayim, it almost looks like he's throwing in seeds actively. V'zor b'miskaven, and he's doing this on purpose. V'ikavar nizru bekarka uvira ksas v'shayar ksas, let's say it's already planted in the ground, and he takes away some and leaves some, nira kimakayim bekarka kilayim, it looks like he's being makayim in the ground kilayim. V'naf galon mikra b'moed katan uv'toras kohanim, we learn out from the psukim in moed katan and in Toras kohanim, the loka, that you get malchus for that, and that's why in this particular case by kilayim, Rabbi Yossi would say it's such a problem that you have to take away everything. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come in here a proof regarding what Rav Huna said from the following Mishnah, Meseches Babba Metzia. Shnayim shefkidu eitz alechad, if two people deposit by one person, zem monev v'zem masayim, this person gives 100 dinar to the shomer, and the other one gives 200 dinar to the shomer, and then when they're coming to get their money back, ze omer masayim shali, v'ze omer masayim shali, this one says the 200 is mine, I'm the one that gave you the 200, and the other one also says the 200 is mine, we don't know who gave 200 and who gave 100, so the halach is no sin lazem monev v'lazem money, you give this one 100 dinar, you give the other one 100 dinar. And the rest, it remains until Eliyahu and Navi comes and can clarify who the money belongs to. And the Gemara here is suggesting that this Mishnah is not in accordance with Rav Huna, because again, Rav Huna said, if you have a situation of impurities and there's more impurities than are allowed, so then we say that all of the impurities have to be reimbursed. But over here you have a situation where the person, one of these two people, actually gave just 100 and he's lying, he's trying to get 200, but he still gets his 100 back. We don't impose any fine against him. We don't say that you don't get anything back because maybe you're lying, and so therefore it seems not like Rav Huna. And the Gemara says, Hachi Hashta, what kind of comparison are you making between this Mishnah and Rav Huna's case? Hasam over there, Vadai Mone Lamar, Umone Lamar, it's certain, it's 100% that each individual gets 100 dinar. We know that each individual certainly deposited at least 100 dinar. But Hachabit over here, Mi Yemar, De Lav Kulei Aruvei Arev. Here, isn't it possible that he actually mixed purposely the entire thing with these impurities? Meaning in a situation where you find more than a quarter of a kav per saw of impurity in this grain that was sold, so the idea is that we want to impose a fine. This was one of the explanations of Rav Huna. The idea is that we want to impose a fine because this person purposely put in this impurity, and in this situation it's possible that he put in all of the impurity on purpose, and that's why we would say, according to Rav Huna, that's why we would say that he has to reimburse for the entire thing. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof, Miseifa, from the end of the very same Mishnah in Bava Metzia. Amar Rabbi Yossi says the opposite of the Tanakama. Im Kain, if so, if you're going to give each one 100 dinar and you're just going to say Yehemunach on the last 100 dinar, so my hifsid aramai, so what did the cheater lose out? Rather, the entire thing has to remain until Eliyahu Navi comes and clarifies. And essentially, Rabbi Yossi is saying that we do punish the Rama, and we say he's not even going to get back his 100 dinar, he's not going to get anything because of the fact that he's cheating, and that seems to be in accordance with the Rav Huna. If we find that somebody put in impurities beyond the acceptable level, we say that we impose a fine and he has to reimburse the entire thing. And the Gemara says again, Hachiashta, what kind of comparison are you making? Hasam Vadai Ika Ramai, over there certainly is a Ramai, meaning in the case of Babba Basra and Rabbi Yossi's case, certainly one of the two people are cheating. But over here, where there's a larger amount of impurity, Miyemar Da'aruve Arif, do we really know that he purposely put those impurities in, and therefore there's less of a reason to impose the fine in our situation? And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof regarding the ruling of Rav Huna from the following Brisa, Shtar Sheyesh Bo Ribis. If you have a document and in the document is written interest, meaning the lender is going to be collecting interest from the borrower, so we impose a fine on the lender. Ve'eno go velo es hakeren, velo es haribis, he can't collect the principal or the interest, so you see that a fine is imposed, and that seems to be in accordance with what Rav Huna said, that if there is too much impurity mixed into the grain that's being sold, we impose a fine, and we say he has to reimburse for all of those impurities. Divrei Rabbi Meir, this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, again, that the malva cannot collect the keren or the ribis. This seems to be a support for Rav Huna. And the Gemara says, Hachiashta, again, how are you comparing the two things? Hasam over there by the ribis, Mishas Ksivahu, to Avid Leishuma, from the writing of the document, he's already doing something wrong. He's writing up an evaluation of interest into the document, and he's committing this Aveira, so to speak, and that's why we impose a fine. But over here, where there's just more impurity in the grain that's being sold, Miyemar Da'aruve Arv, who says that he purposely mixed it in? It may not have been done on purpose, and therefore it could be that no fine should be imposed. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof Miseifa from the end of this brisa by Ribis. It says at the end, V'chachamim, that the Chachamim, they disagree with Rabbi Meir. They say Govas HaKaren Ve'eno Govas HaRibis, that the Malva is able to collect the principal, he just can't collect the Ribis, and that seems to be against Rav Huna, because here no fine is imposed. He's allowed to collect that which is mutter. And the Gemara says, Hachiasht, again, how can you compare the two cases? Hasam Vadai Karna de Heteru, over there, by the case of Ribis, the principal is certainly mutter. That's something that he's allowed to collect, so he collects it. But over here, Miyemar to Kulelo Aruve Arif, who says that he didn't purposely mix in all of these impurities in the grain, and therefore there's reason to fine him on all of it. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof regarding Rav Huna's ruling from the following, the Tani Ravin bar Rav Nachman, because Ravin bar Rav Nachman taught, Lo es hamoser bilvadu machzer, he doesn't only return the extra, ela machzer lo es kol rivon kulan, he has to return all of the quarter kav areas. The case over here is, there's a sale of land, and it turns out that the buyer bought more land than the seller thought he was supposed to be selling. The buyer essentially got extra land, so we say that if it's just a little bit extra, and it's the same kind of a measure, it's an area which you put a quarter kav of seeds per base saw. That's how you measure. That's a normal amount of extra land. That in that case, it would not have to be returned. But let's say it's more than that amount of extra land. So now the land has to be returned to the seller. So here, Rav and Barav Nachman is bringing down that he doesn't only return what was extra. Now that we found he went over, he has to actually return everything. And that seems to be exactly like Rav Huna was saying, by the impurities by the grain. Al mahecha de boya adure kula mahadir. We see that in a situation where things have to be returned, the entire amount has to be returned. We don't just say that you return the extra. It seems to be exactly like Rav Huna. And the Gemara again says, Hachi hashta, how can you make a comparison between the two cases? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Hey Amud Aleph.